Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, and each episode I look to bring you a different guest who has encouraged, inspired, or challenged me in one way or another and bring them on to share some of their story in hopes that it inspires you to tell some of yours. I am so excited to talk to my guest today, Natalie Jenkins. Natalie, thank you for being here. Tell everybody kind of who you are.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. As you stated, my name is Natalie Jenkins. I am currently a kindergarten teacher. I have also had experience in special education, taught in third grade classroom, high school, early childhood, now elementary, just kind of done the scope.
You've got a lot of great. I can't wait to chat today. So, Natalie, when I talk with anybody, whether they're an educator or not, I always like to start at the beginning and think about us as kids. And so, when you were a kid, dreaming what you were going to be when you grew up, was teacher even on that list? Like, what did you want to be?
Oh my goodness. It was at the top of the list, probably number two and then number three on the list for me. I always taught to my stuffed animals. I am the youngest of two, but we're 10 years apart.
Oh, wow.
So we kind of weren't really in the house at the same time. So my stuffed animals were my students. And I also took it as far as my walls were my board. So I would always get in trouble for writing my lessons on the wall. Whether I was in the kitchen, my bedroom, middle hallway, it was just always in me.
I love it. And so, knowing that teaching was always in you, did you always have a draw towards elementary as opposed to secondary or vice versa? I know you've had experience with both, but what were you
Yeah.
initially drawn to?
Initially, the littles, they have my
Mhm.
heart. Oh my goodness. I just love how excited they are about everything. They love and embrace challenges and just to have that eagerness
Mhm.
about life. So it's definitely been with the littles. Even at church, I was mostly watching the younger ones, Awana, you name it. I was with them.
I love that. And so, thinking about you being a teacher now for a few years, what do you feel like you really learned about yourself since becoming a teacher?
Um, that I just have to be one with the kids.
Mhm.
That's it. They don't, need more authority in their life. Like, yes, I need to tell them what's right and wrong,
Right.
but they need me to just be there with them, enjoy the experience with them. And I enjoy that part of even if we get off, the lesson plan or what was asked for the day, just knowing that they were excited
Mhm.
and we all learned together. That's a big one for me.
I love that. And one thing that I know so many educators are really passionate about are making sure that they're really getting to know their students and connect with them and valuing where they come from. How do you connect with students?
Definitely just by listening to their
Mhm.
stories. And if I do have either a connection personally or I know someone who has a connection with what they like, then we get the ball rolling on that and going, oh, wow, that's something that we actually do have in common,
Yeah.
especially with the kinders. Kinder was my favorite year of school. So I'm always remembering, oh, I did that too. Or they're learning that and
Mhm.
they're like, what? You did that too? So
Yeah.
it's just great to be able to really listen
Mhm.
and know when to make that connection point with them.
I think that's so fantastic, and that's what's I love the most about kinder kids is they get excited about everything. Like if you
Everything.
just change the tone in your voice, they're like, "What? What is that?" And it's like the most crazy thing. But that's what I always loved about kinders. I was like, if I need somebody to act excited about what I'm trying to say, I just got to go find a 5-year-old,
Oh
and
my
they will do
goodness.
it.
Yes, I feel like I'm Picasso. I am the worst drawing person ever, but they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's the best tree we've ever seen."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Ah, I love it."
My wife did pre-K for a few years at a private school, and she would always say, I go into work every day because I know there will always be somebody who tells me how pretty I am and how great I do everything. And she goes, that's what keeps me coming back. And I thought that is so true of that age. Well,
Yes.
Natalie, when you think about your own experience through school, what was school like for you?
Yeah. Well, I had a lot of different schooling experiences. So I'll start at the beginning. I actually went to private school from about kinder all the way to early elementary because at that time the private school did not have like a middle or a high school
Mhm.
component to it yet. So I had most of my schooling there, really small, probably like 8 to 10 kids in my classroom. Like we really were a family
Yeah.
and we knew each other. And then I made the leap to public school around ninth grade.
Uh-huh.
And so that was a different experience for
Yeah.
me, just getting used to the hustle and bustle, a lot of
Mhm.
kids,
Mhm.
being like, oh, sometimes I might have a desk, sometimes I won't. It was that was new. So just doing that and making those friends.
Yeah.
And then my senior year, I actually ended up going back to private school just because I was active in a lot of sports pageants and, it met my scheduling needs. And so I got to go back
Yeah.
to that smaller environment and graduate from there.
I love that. And so when you look at your own life, Natalie, and you think about all the things you've been through, the joys, the successes, the failure, the pain, all that kind of stuff, is there when you think about all the events, is there one that really stands out that you think that was really instrumental into creating the woman we see today?
Wow, I would have to say third grade. Mrs.
Mhm.
Stewart, she really, I knew I wanted to be a teacher, but she really
Mhm.
put the icing on the cake for me. She loved each and every one of her students. Like
Mhm.
there was no guessing. Does she really love us? Does she care? Like she gave a genuine attention. I still don't even know how she was able to do that to make us just feel like we were the only one in the room when she was talking to us.
Mhm.
Um, at that time, we were being introduced to friends who had different learning abilities, and she would let them come up and kind of talk about it and show us like when they are pulled out of the room what is going on, so we kind of have that understanding. I mean, it was just the most magical experience,
Yeah.
honestly, that I've ever had. And so anytime I do something, I think, what's the Miss Stewart touch, what's the Miss
Mhm.
Stewart approach to making my
Right.
kids feel like they're just the only one in the room.
That's beautiful. And it's always funny, no matter how old we get, we can think back to those teachers, many
Yeah.
of us who they left that impact. And so I always love when a teacher when somebody becomes a teacher and they always try to emulate that other person because it's like they left such a mark. Well,
Yeah.
shifting gears a little bit, Natalie, I'd love to kind of talk with you. There's a lot going on in our country right now.
Yeah.
And, you and I had a conversation at one point where it turned into, you made a comment that just, it hit me square between the eyes. And I, you said, sometimes I feel like I have to choose between being an educator and being African American. And when you said that, like that just, it ripped me. Like I'm getting emotional now talking about it because I hate that anybody would feel like they'd have to choose. And so tell me where that comes from. Like how, explain that to anybody who might be listening today.
Yeah, for me, it just means that the lens that I have to look through something
Mhm.
is my teacher professional lens of holding it together,
Yeah.
still going on through the day, even though my heart might be really heavy, and making sure that that doesn't pass on to my students. And then the African American lens of really wanting to voice my opinion on it and
Mhm.
talk to my students about it in a way to see, how does it impact them? And also, what it comes from looking like someone like me. I
Right.
went through school and I never saw a teacher that looked like me, which is
Mhm.
another reason why I wanted to do that. So it's important to connect um, and make sure that I know those things. But like I said, it is a balancing act of staying in my professional lane, but knowing that it truly does impact me as an African American.
And so, when you see all of this happening around the country right now, how do you maintain this sense of hope and this sense of strength for when I've got to be ready to be a symbol of strength for my students to walk them through these issues that even though they may not be in school today, they're
Right.
going to be coming back to school. These are systematic issues that haven't gone away that we're going to have to continue to talk about. Like, how do you hold it together enough where you don't feel like it's never going to get better?
Just my faith.
Mm,
I have to lean on that. I have to know that the best is yet to come.
yeah.
This is tough. It is hard. I'm raising a young African American son myself. My nephew, just
Right.
it is around me, but knowing that better has to come and
Right.
it will come, and praying
Mhm.
on both sides of the issue
Yeah.
is really, really keeping me together.
And so how would you encourage more of us who have the, I'm thinking like those of us who are white, how can we be better allies throughout these situations?
I think just turning at the sensitivity and knowing that yes, on the outside it does look like a color issue, but it's really on the side of right and on the side of wrong at the end of the day. So just knowing or letting your colleagues, your friends, your neighbors know that you're on the side of right, no matter
Right.
what's on that side, but that it's the side of right, that you're praying and just trying to show that understanding. Most of us would love like a listening ear, and
Mhm.
if you do have questions, that it is okay to ask.
Yeah.
Don't shun away from that or shy away from that, but definitely just letting them know that you're here for them.
And I love just there's so many things that you said there that I think really resonated with me just about, that it's just a question of right and wrong.
Yeah,
And so just looking at it that way, leaning on your faith and continuing to have hope and praying and not praying without action, but praying still and seeking to understand. And one of the things that I remember when I was studying some of these issues was that the conversations that parents of color have with their children, and how they're so different
yeah,
from conversations I grew up with my mom. And when I understood that, or began to understand that, that was mind blowing to me, because I had never had any kind of recognition that the conversations would have been different just because
yeah.
somebody was being raised by a different family. How do you find yourself having those conversations now with your own son or your nephew?
Yeah, honestly, the language hasn't changed from what I was taught growing up when I talk to them. I was taught that when I go in a store, don't put my hands in my pocket.
Mhm.
Make sure that they are visible.
Right.
When I am checking out, always get a receipt and get it put in a bag. It doesn't matter if it's a small item. That way it
Mhm.
doesn't appear, or anyone could accuse me of shoplifting. So to make sure that I'm always, doing those things, that I'm alert, I am watching what's around me and my surroundings.
Mhm.
So it's honestly the same conversation that I have with my son that I was told.
I can't. That's so, I don't even know what the word is, but I appreciate you just being open and honest and
Yeah,
sharing some of that today. And so, when I think about this moving forward, and I think about it in a bigger picture with education and things too,
yeah,
how one question I always ask during these conversations on Tell Your Story is the issue of doubt. Is the issue of the opinions of others weighing on us, that we begin to doubt who we are, or doubt our gifts or what we bring to the table? How do you keep doubt at bay so that it doesn't consume you?
wow, that's a powerful question. I honestly think it's a day by day thing,
Mhm.
because we all doubt ourselves. I think that's part of it. And you doubt, are you really making a difference? Or are they looking at me in a different light? There's so many questions.
Yeah.
And just to keep that at bay, I just remind myself and remember that I am enough, and
Mhm.
that what I'm bringing to the table is enough. And that if I get across to one person, that is enough. So just that word enough kind of helps me to push my doubt away.
That's so true. And it's sometimes such a hard thing, but it's one of those things that that's why self-talk is so important, because
Oh
if
my
you're
goodness.
always telling yourself I'm enough, I've got, like, your brain's going to begin to believe it instead of believing those falsities that other people might be saying, or that you
Oh,
begin
yeah.
to think even if they're not saying it.
Oh, yeah. And I always try to tell my students, your words are so powerful. Um, the power of yet. Like, I totally believe in that. The words are on my board, in my classroom, and just learning and teaching my students, even myself sometimes, and they'll catch me and they'll say, oh, you need to say yet. Like, we don't, putting that positive spin truly makes a difference, in your outlook, the outcome, and how far you push yourself.
Right. And when you think of people who've played a really big role in your life, who's somebody that stands out? I know you mentioned the third grade teacher earlier, but
Yeah.
who is somebody that really stands out as somebody who's being really instrumental in you, in your own life?
I would say a big instrument, I'm gonna try not to cry on this one, is my great Aunt Mildred.
Mhm.
She is no longer with us, but those power talks,
Mhm.
she would do that. She would sit and tell me about how strong I am and, how the greatness that's within me and everything that you can accomplish. I mean, she accomplished so much from the ground up
Right.
in Shreveport, Louisiana, and worked her way, through the school and from starting very low to being principal, superintendent, school board.
Wow.
I mean, all of that. And she was my inspiration. And I actually have her rocking chair in my classroom. So
Oh.
that's the piece of her I keep with me. But yeah, she was an excellent, amazing, inspirational woman.
Well, I love the words power talks that she would have with you. Do you find yourself now having those power talks with your own son?
Oh my goodness, yes. I have those a lot. He is 6 years old, full of life, full of questions. So we always have a lot of talks, and why is now his
Mhm,
favorite
mhm.
favorite thing. But I do, and we talk affirmations in the morning of how great our day is going to be, and how we can set forth, and how we want to do good for others, but also
Mhm.
just remember that who you are and that your name means something, and go out and do great things.
Well, I love just you can tell just by your demeanor and the conversation that those positive affirmations, those power talks, those things you tell yourself, like all of that really is ingrained in you. And I
Yeah.
think that, for so many educators who are so broken by different things in their life right now, that those little things make a difference and really help your perspective. And so, you also this year have been working through COVID like the rest of us and figuring out that new normal. And
Yeah.
so what do you think has been the biggest challenge through that season of change?
Wow. Trying to still give that same energy and love
Mhm.
through the computer.
Yeah.
I talk with my hands. I'm sure they've gone up a lot. So obviously I love to like I do everything with my hands. And so
Yeah.
that piece is kind of cut out, but just making sure that my kiddos knew that Miss Jenkins is still there. They still care. And I love that we would get on. And at first, they would want to know a little bit more about it. And then once they realize this is where we are, then we started talking about losing teeth. It went back to the normal conversation of things for their age. But I just
Mhm.
wanted them to know, and probably said it a million times, that I love them. That to enjoy this time, to stay safe with their family, and just explore. This was
Yeah.
their time to really explore.
And I've found as I've talked to many educators, and I know with my own experience, those of us who teach or work with littles, I think this has been the hardest because
Um,
it is such a hugging, touching,
yes,
tactile type job that
yes,
working with a kid through a computer screen and not being able to console them or to just physically be there with them is so difficult. So I appreciate you sharing that. Well,
yes.
Natalie, one way that I always love to end all of these conversations is I believe as people, there's so many things we hold close to who we are and our hearts. And so for anybody who might be listening or watching today, if they were to walk away with one thing, what would your one thing be for them?
Oh, I would just want them to know that you are enough, whether
Mhm.
it's in education, you're not in education, you're in between trying to figure out what it is, that you are enough. Again, I can't stress positive affirmations. We are all here for greatness, no matter how it looks on the scale, but we are all here for greatness. You are enough, and go shine your light.
I love that. Well, Natalie, you have been such a positive light, and I am so glad that you decided to come on Tell Your Story today. So thank you for coming and sharing some of your story with my listeners today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was an honor.
And thank you everybody for listening or watching another episode of Tell Your Story. Remember, you can check out past episodes on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you get your stuff, it's there. I hope today's conversation with Natalie has encouraged you to get out there and tell your story because every story matters.